this is in a sense the history of women in education. The fact that, of course, then it's taken even longer for women of color to be recognized as equals, equals to other women. So white women have made a lot more gains than women of color have made in terms of being represented in higher levels of academia, in managerial positions, etc. That just shows actually the importance of thinking intersectionally about these sorts of questions, that gains for women haven't translated to gains for all women. So it feels momentous, and I think I'm honored, to be in this position, and I just want to be able to use this moment actually to be able to talk about these kinds of questions that really affect all women particularly of marginal backgrounds, who find it very difficult even to enter these institutions, let alone to be recognized as equal.
Do you see a shift? And if you do, what are the signs that suggest to you that there is a shift in which women are finally claiming leadership positions?
Women find it very hard. There is a glass ceiling, as has been already discovered in the corporate world, in the world of work, but I think this exists almost everywhere. And as I said, referring to my earlier answer, women of color have particular barriers, because these barriers are there from very early on in terms of whether you're encouraged to pursue academic pursuits, whether your teachers give you advice in that direction, whether you can actually even access the kind of educational networks and institutions that help you advance your career, So I think the more role models there are, the more that people like myself and others around me mobilize and lobby for opening access to women of color, we're going to keep seeing these barriers being reproduced over and over, and I struggled as a graduate student, I struggled to have my views, my ideas, my contributions seen as being equal to that of the white males in my department, and I remember how often I was told that working on India was not going to get me very far in my career, so we've come a long way from that.
Let me focus on your work, Manali, especially since you are working on issues of gender violence and various other, aspects that lead to that in India and in South Africa. And it's a large project that you're the principal investigator of. And how big a part is India of this effort?
It is, as you said, a very large project. We've been given over £1.5 million for 3 years to do a very, very thorough investigation into gendered violence in India and South Africa. So India and South Africa are the two cases, the equal share of the work. And our focus is really on Delhi and Johannesburg. So we've decided that we really want to look at how urban transformation is involved, or how it helps propagate or reproduce certain forms of gendered violence. And our motivation for this was really to say, look, these are two countries that have gone through huge transformation since the 1980s, 1990s. And what we want to do in this project is really to do a very thorough investigation of what exactly is going on? How are women experiencing urban transformation? Where do they encounter this violence? How much of it is happening in the home? What are the conditions under which this violence is happening? How do people in the communities perceive this violence? How do they justify it, rationalize it? How do women themselves, how do women define violence?
Yes.
What is seen as violence and what isn't? Beyond physical violence, there's harassment, emotional abuse, and things that, maybe a lifetime of psychological abuse that women have, and they don't know how to name it, right? So the language in which women themselves will describe it is actually going to be very important for us, so that we don't go around assuming that everyone shares the same idea of what violence is.
Manali, do you have a view on marital rape in India? It's not a law, as you know.
Yeah, well, exactly. I think that symbolizes pretty much what we're interested in, right? Is that the most intimate of relationships is seen as being outside the purview of this kind of understanding. So there's this idea that once a woman is married, she is being looked after by a man, and that she, in a sense, belongs to him. And I think that is actually at the core of a lot of the problems for women, which is that marriage is seen as a young girl's ultimate destination. And so women are forced into marriage. The whole idea that an unmarried woman is a problem in society that needs to be solved is at the core of this. So these are all interconnected. What women's final destination is seen to be, what happens to women once they're married, that they're looked after, that they're safe. And if they are not, then it's the woman's problem. I mean, anecdotally, I've seen this in so many of my extended kinship and family and friends, that women who are unhappy in their marriage are asked really to adjust, right? And to adjust.
But I want to take you back to perhaps your growing up. You just mentioned how, like most women in India, going through some kind of sexual harassment is pretty much normal. So much so that sometimes women don't even pay attention to it and assume it's part of their growing up, so to speak. But what really inspired you to take up the subjects that you do and land up at, Cambridge with a specific focus on gendered violence?
I do think that the 2012 what happened in 2012 really affected me very deeply. I mean, it was a sense, it could have happened to anyone I know. It could have happened to me, it could have happened to anyone I know. It's not very far from where my parents lived at the time. Just this very deep anger and a sense that something so vile had happened, that it was unspeakable. And I think that, we know that in India, that women have faced unprecedented and huge amounts of violence, and they continue to face that all the time. And it felt to me that I wanted to do something really, something about that. I wanted to really create some sort of a piece of work around looking more deeply at this question.
We always look at role models, and when I started SheThePeople, my aim was to say, let's look at role models who we don't always see in the magazines. And there must be a reason why we don't. Why do you think it's important for young women and girls to have real people as role models?
Yes, I mean, I think one of the things about role models that are real, sort of more down to earth perhaps, is that it can feel attainable. If I see someone on the cover of a magazine, or I look at people with incredible lives, it's something to admire, but you may not always relate to it in a kind of day-to-day sense. So I'm in the ideal discipline. I get to actually have this contact with students almost every day. And in my lectures, for example, they're very interactive. I talk to students afterwards. They come and ask me for, advice or ideas that they want to, develop. And this makes them see in front of them, in real flesh and blood, how it is that you can do something. And I didn't have too many of those role models myself. I think it's a shame, really. I think that women particularly need to see something that's real to them, that's achievable.
What would be your advice to a young woman out there following her dreams?
Well, exactly. I mean, I think, women need to learn, I think, to be kind of fearless. It's so easy especially when you're younger, to doubt yourself, to let yourself, hold yourself back because you're not getting the encouragement. People are not saying to you, wow, that's an amazing idea, why don't you develop that? So an inner voice, how can women develop this inner voice that says, ignore the negative and pick up on the positive? But I think for older women, for women in positions like I'm finding myself in now, which is that, we can really help move that conversation along to see how we can quiet those voices that are really detracting from women from moving forward.